Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on today's labor unions. Historically, the role of unions has made an impact on workers across the country. The minimum wage law, the result of unions. A 40-hour work week, unions. And safe working conditions, most likely the result of unions too. But how much influence do they have now? That's what we'll get to tonight. Joining us now live in studio is Patrick Shea, a Salt Lake City attorney and historian for Utah's labor unions. Pat, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Rosie, thank you very much. And I would like, as a matter of personal privilege, to dedicate this to my step-grandfather, who is a proud railroad union member, and at age 8 took me out on the picket line here in Salt Lake City.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Pat, Utah has a pretty interesting history when it comes to labor unions. What can you tell us about the conditions that miners were in at the turn of the last century?
Well, the Native Americans always considered any of the pioneers or subsequent population as immigrants. But as the pioneers settled in, they began to take a home stake interest here. And when all of the Greek and Irish and Serbian and Croatian and English and Irish immigrants came here, there was a strong resistance to them. And most of the immigrants in that latter period were miners. And so the mining area was one of the first organized efforts. And there were two outstanding Utahns, Bill Heywood and Joe Hill. And my step-grandfather, who I mentioned, actually knew Joe Hill because my step-grandfather was a Teamster, which meant that he drove ox carts to Oper, which was a mining town in the Ochre Mountains. And then he went to the railroad union. But the predominant culture here was threatened by that kind of independent organization. And as I think you will hear subsequently, Brigham Young actually was one of the first organizers of a union. It was the Printers Union. So you might ask the president of the AFL-CIO to fill you in on that.
All right, I'll make a note of that. What was the high watermark for organized labor in this country? Was it under FDR's New Deal?
Yes, absolutely. Both Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, his wife, were strong union supporters. And I think the change happened in 1936 to 1940 when the economic recovery began to take hold. And people, I just heard this story the other day, they were actually killing animals in the zoo for the meat because people were in such deprived situation. So in that instance, people began to see that their collective effort at their workplace would allow them to have some economic security. And so they formed unions, and you had some great leaders that came out of that. Walter Reuther in particular with the UAW.
Now let's talk about some prominent scandals. Could you sum up what happened with the Teamsters around the 1960s?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was the deputy to the Senate Intelligence Committee and had to look at the mafia's effort to assassinate Fidel Castro. As I did that, I found that they also had infiltrated some unions, but Teamsters in particular. And James Hoffa was the president of the Teamsters and was never convicted, but it was alleged that he was closely entwined with the mafia. And he died an untimely death in what they called cement boots.
Now, there was a significant downturn in views on unions during the 1980s. Let's turn to the air traffic control strike, how President Reagan handled it, and what it meant for unions. What can you tell us about those events?
Well, President Reagan was a master at television, as we know from his earlier Hollywood career. And in television series or in movies, you need to have a theme, generally of fear. And so the unions became the big bad organization that he could go against. And the air traffic controllers, which are a vital part of our air services, chose to take him on. And there was such political support for President Reagan, mostly, in my judgment, because of his charisma, that he succeeded in shutting them down.
Now, Pat, we've got about a minute left. Before we close, I'd like to get some final thoughts from you. Where are we now with unions?
I think with the pandemic, people have begun to realize that we are better off in a collective approach where we look out for each other, for our families, for our neighbors, instead of this sort of rugged individualism, the John Wayne image, or the image that President Reagan tried to convey, that it's the individual that counts, it doesn't count for the community. And I think of the year of the pandemic has shown that we are a community and we need to respond as a community, and collective action like a union provides security for the family, for neighbors, and all the way around in the community.
All right, you've been hearing from Patrick Shea, a Salt Lake City attorney. Pat, thanks for being with us tonight and sharing your knowledge and insight with us.
Thanks, Rosie, and be safe.
Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on today's labor unions. Joining us now live in studio are Asay, president of Utah American Federation of Teachers, and Brandon Dew, district representative of Operating Engineers, Local Union Number 3. Thank you both for being with us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks, Rosie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Brad, let's start with you. Can you tell us about the unions that you represent, such as your roles, the work that your members do, and what you generally provide for your members?
Sure. So we represent all faculty and staff in both public education and higher education in the state. We also have a local union that falls underneath our state federation, ASME Local 1004, which covers public employees throughout the state.
And Brandon, let's hear from you. Tell us about your organization and what you do.
Sure, yeah, so the operating engineers represent heavy equipment operators and diesel mechanics throughout the state of Utah. So we represent big companies like Kennecott Utah Copper, Granite Construction, W.W. Clyde, Geneva Rocks, lots of construction companies throughout the state.
Now, Brandon, Utah is a right-to-work state. And for those that don't know, what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's really simple, honestly. So right to work simply means that a employee can work for a union company, receive all the union benefits, the working conditions. The union actually has to go represent them, but they don't have to pay union dues. So really, right to work just means that an employee can get pension, health care, and union representation without paying their fair share.
Now, Brad, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Brandon said?
Sure. Right to work is probably one of the most misunderstood statements in the state. Really, it does mean what Brandon just said, but also we are allowed to have unions in the state. We're allowed to organize unions and under right to work, and it really does not stop the work of unionizing, and we still have powerful unions in the state, despite those that would like to see the unions cease to exist under right to work. We're still strong.
I'd like to turn now to the pandemic. When we were staying at home to flatten the curve, we figured out who the essential workers were. They included delivery drivers, grocery store workers, and construction workers, along with teachers and frontline medical personnel. Yet when the vaccine came out, not all of these people qualified for early vaccinations. Brad, can you tell us about what happened with the teachers union?
Absolutely. Faculty and staff in public and higher education were forced to work from home, which is completely a new concept. They had to adjust quickly last spring. And then we actually have been back to work face-to-face for most of this school year, but it's been a real issue. We fought for faculty and staff and those teachers and also other public school employees to get on the vaccination list and to be moved up that list, and that happened. We sent letters to the governor, worked with other organizations, and lobbied hard for them to get their vaccinations. But still, our higher ed folks weren't able to get those vaccinations as soon as we wanted them to, and that caused a lot of stress among public employees and education employees. So it was a tough fight, but at least we got partially the teachers and staff vaccinated.
And we love our teachers so much, so that's so great to hear that there are people behind them. And Brandon, can you tell us about what happened with construction?
Yeah, Rosie, so in construction, as you know, construction was deemed essential. And so our members have been out working, bettering our communities every day during the pandemic. And actually in the construction industry, the building trades have been growing during the pandemic. Construction, last year in my union alone, we grew 13% in membership and hours. And so the pandemic was really a non-factor when it came to the operating engineers and the building trades unions.
Now, Brandon, my producer is telling me that I should follow up with a question about the vaccine. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and whether those who were working in the construction industry got the vaccine, and if not, why?
Yeah, Rosie, we were not moved ahead to the front of the list for vaccines. We've still been doing our jobs, going to work every day, being socially distant, using disinfectants, making sure that we're doing the right thing to keep our members safe and to keep the public safe. But we're just in line like everybody else, so I can't speak to why we were not put to the front. We were definitely put to the front to go out there and take care of our community, but we were not when it came to the vaccine.
I know, and it's just construction workers as well are so essential to the core of our society and our community. We have about a minute left. I'd like to get final thoughts from the both of you. Brad, what would you like our viewers to know about unions?
Well, the unions have a proud heritage. AFT was one of the first founding unions in Utah in 1919, so we've been around for a very long time. And you know, we're there for employees and workers' rights. We're there to protect them and make sure that they're treated fairly. And belonging to a union is a proud thing for our employees. And we love to organize and we love to help all employees and reach out to them to make sure that they're treated equitably.
Brandon, let's hear from you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. I think just finally, just to say that unions are essential. You know, saw just on the internet today, we're being called the big bad labor bosses. That's the least reality. Unions are a group of people coming together for a common cause. We're here to represent our members. Our members are ultimately the union. And as Brad stated earlier in the discussion, unions are here in Utah. We're thriving, we're growing, and for the first time in a very long time, the majority of Americans believe that if they could join a labor union, they would. And I think that bodes well for our future.
All right, you've been hearing from Brad Asay, President of Utah American Federation of Teachers, and Brandon Dew, District Representative of Operating Engineers Local Union Number 3. Thank you both for being here tonight to talk about your organization and your work.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on today's labor unions. We just heard from some local union representatives. Now we turn to a more general and national perspective. Joining us now live in studio is Jeff Worthington, President of Utah's American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, also known as the AFL-CIO. Jeff, thanks for being here tonight to be part of our conversation.
Well, thank you for having us tonight, Rosie.
Jeff, let's start this segment with talking about the AFL-CIO. What does your organization do and what services do you provide to your members?
The AFL-CIO, we're over all of our affiliate unions. Nationally, we have 56 affiliate unions. In the state of Utah, we got 38 that we represent. And we fight all of the legislative battles to make sure that we don't lose any traction in our licensing laws, any protections, our safety laws that we've got in place to protect our workers and also our health and welfare.
I'd like to turn now to the efforts to form unions happening at Amazon warehouses in North Carolina and Alabama right now. Where are we with those efforts, and did anything good come from them?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they do. Recently in North Carolina, there was a push by the Amazon workers to organize there, but Amazon in the 11th hour came out and offered the employees a raise financially, and so they settled on that, and the unionizing effort there failed. Right now in Atlanta, we got a big push by the Amazon workers there, and it's actually getting national attention and national support from all of the state AFL-CIOs across the country. We're backing their movement and offering all the support that we can give to them with their efforts to organize.
Now, in regards to politics, nationally, Democrats could traditionally rely on union support, but that's an overgeneralization because of the different needs of different unions. How are candidates supported on a national level?
Well, that's a good question, Rosie, because basically Democrats have usually been the supporters of our labor unions, but anymore it's kind of a general discussion, really. And what we're really looking for now is people that support us on our policies and our issues, because the support line has kind of been blurred over the years. And our labor issues are very important to us, and we need that to continue to build and develop the middle class of America. That's what the unions have done for America, is actually created the middle class, and we are very intent on maintaining that.
Now, in terms of labor and workers, where do you think we are in terms of our country's laws and attitude? Do you think government is helping workers right now?
Well, with the new administration, we'll see. But in the past, no. I think they've done us more harm than good, especially with the right to work issue that's gone across the country. The Janus Supreme Court ruling pretty much set that up, that really took some of the power away from unions, the way we protect our members. And so I would say that from a national perspective, we haven't gotten the support that we would really like to see.
Now, we talked about the pandemic in the last segment. Is there anything that you'd like to add to what was said?
Yeah, that's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. From the very beginning of the pandemic, I was asked to sit on one of the governor's task force on the economic recovery task force, and so I was very much involved with the essential workers, who was the essential workers, and so I took it upon myself as the president of the Utah AFL-CIO to go ahead and tell my people to show up to work, continue doing what you're doing. You know, this is what we've been asked to do. We'll be taken care of in the end. And so they have done that. They've stepped up to the plate. They've showed up to work every day. They've done what's been asked of them. But when it come down to the vaccine level, I've been disappointed in what we were told would be the case.
Yeah. Jeff, I'd like to get some final thoughts from you. What do you want people to know about unions that we haven't yet talked about in this discussion?
Well, I'll tell you, unions, like I mentioned before, they are what created the middle class of America. We're a very proud group of people. We consider ourselves family, brotherhood, sisterhood. We take care of each other. What we fight for in good wages, health care benefits, retirement benefits, we fight for the whole package so that when you do reach that retirement age, when you can finally enjoy your golden years, you're going to do it in a comfortable fashion and not just depending upon Social Security, which may or may not be here.
All right, you've been hearing from Jeff Worthington, president of Utah AFL-CIO. Jeff, thank you for joining our conversation tonight. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you.